All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Big Questions with Big John. I'm your host, Big John, and this is the show where we talk to various interesting people of all stripes, but one of the stripes all of them tend to have is a libertarian one. And with me today, someone that I think is a very interesting person. I follow her on Twitter. That's how she came to my attention. She has great tweets. She has great takes. And I said, I have to interview this person. She has what seems to me to be a fascinating story. Let me read you her bio because I don't want to miss anything. I'll look over here a little bit. This is Martha Bueno. And Martha Bueno is the CEO and co-founder of Our Good Products, Inc., a company offering a better way of consuming Delta-8 and other cannabinoids. Cannabinoids. How do you pronounce that, Martha? Which one is the proper
I
pronunciation?
think you can go with either, but generally it's cannabinoids.
Cannabinoids. Okay, cannabinoids. In 2022, she ran for the Miami-Dade, for Miami-Dade commissioner, rather, and she collected 22% of the vote. So I believe you came in second, I believe, in that race at 22%, which, when you think about the primary of it all, running as a libertarian, that's actually an outstanding result. Additionally, Martha served 4 years as the vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade. So everyone, please welcome Martha Bueno. Martha, how are you?
Thanks so much for having me. This is really awesome. And I'm doing fantastic. I can't complain.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, like I said, you came to my attention. Not that my attention means anything, but you came to my attention on Twitter because I love your Twitter account. You're very direct. You're very straightforward. And very libertarian. There's no wishy-washy to your position, in my opinion. Anyone can see that you're a libertarian without you having to tell them that you're a libertarian, right?
I'm not technically a libertarian anymore, though.
Small L libertarian. Okay, we can talk about that actually. But why don't we start out with your background? Because we were talking a little bit before the camera turned on, and I find it fascinating. And so I want to get into that a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. So first of all, I just have to say that to me as a Cuban-American, I just assumed everybody had a story like mine. And it wasn't until I left Miami and really started to talking to people that are not from this area. So Miami is a huge Cuban diaspora.
Mm.
So pretty much everybody's Cuban or from some country that also escaped communism or socialism or something along those lines. So I just assumed everybody had a story like mine. And it's only recently that I'm like, oh, you guys probably need to hear this. So my parents grew up in Cuba. They were very young children when Castro came to power in the 1959. They were young teens. And by the time my father was 21, he had attempted to leave Cuba back then in the late 60s, early 70s. You couldn't just leave the way people are leaving now.
Right.
You needed permission from the government. So in order to, my father couldn't get permission, so he attempted to escape and was captured and sent to a prison for, they sentenced him for 6 years.
Wow.
After 6 months of good behavior meaning he was able to, they felt that they were brainwashing him, and
he was re-educated. Right. Yeah.
Re-educated, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly the term. And he did it, of course, on purpose. He's like, yes, of course, socialism's great, communism, viva Fidel, all those things. They moved him to a gulag, a work camp, where my grandmother, also named Martha Bueno, she planned the whole thing. She planned to, his escape, and then didn't go through with it. My mom did. My mom was like, if you're not going to do it, I guess I will. And ended up breaking my dad out of jail and delivering him to a town right next to the base, the naval base that the U.S. has, Guantanamo. It's a small town called Caimanera. Long story short, he waited it out. He swam out to the U.S. naval base in the middle of the night and made it to the base where they said, welcome to America, and flew him to New Jersey. So
wow.
That's how we made it here.
Wow.
I was born here in America, thank God, to American citizens at that point. And I am eternally grateful for that. But I also grew up in Venezuela before what Venezuela is now. In the 80s and 90s, Venezuela was a free country with the largest petroleum reserves in the world. They actually are bigger than the Middle East. And in the late 90s, Hugo Chavez took over, and Venezuela is now in a worse situation than Cuba is. So these governments will sell you this socialism as an equality. It's so great, and we're all going to be equal. And what they fail to mention is we're all going to be equal, standing in bread lines and starving.
Right.
So I see that happening. I saw it happening. I saw my father being very vocal at that time and saying, this is bad and we really need to worry about this.
Right.
Seeing Venezuela and say, that's never going to happen here. We're never going to have that situation here. And then it happening and having to flee yet a second time in my parents' short lives. At that point, they were in their 40s and they had to flee for a second time this type of situation. I think that that's really the one distinction that I've been able to have is, most people flee once. And so now when I talk to people here in America and I'm able to have this voice and tell them like, we really need to worry about this. And they're like, well, it's never going to happen here. It's like, you say that,
Right.
but I've seen it happen. And, yes, we have the reserve currency. Yes, this is America, but you already see it. People don't want you to have your guns and they don't want you to have a voice and have the First Amendment rights. And those are things so incredibly important. And please, 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 let's focus on this and let's not let what happened in Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua and so many countries happen here.
Yeah. And, it's interesting what you said, because I was born here as well, but my father came here in 1948 and he's from Greece originally. And his island was first taken over by the fascists. Let me rephrase that. First, it was taken over by the Nazis. They occupied the island. Then the fascist Italians took over the island. So he grew up under both. And then after World War II, the communists moved in. So he had one after another of these horrible authoritarian regimes. So when he came to America, he made his life here. He raised his family here. He would tell me when I was 9 or 10, he goes, John, you have to hate the communists. And I would say, why, Dad? I'm 8 or 9 at this point. He said, because they were the only ones allowed to have the guns. And they would tell us what we had to eat and what we had to think and what we had to say. And I think that for perhaps yourself, myself, children of immigrants who grew up under communism, under National Socialism, Nazism, fascism, and even to yourself who had the added experience of growing up in Venezuela and then seeing that change over the years, we actually view liberty as something precious, and we view it as something that you can lose very easily. And you're not going to lose it to tanks. You're not going to lose it to machine guns, because that's easy to spot. You can spot the communist with a gun. You can't spot the communist that comes to you and says free healthcare. You don't spot the communist that comes to you and says, oh, offensive language? Let's keep everyone safe. Let's keep everyone happy.
It sounds great.
Doesn't it? It sounds like, hey, what's wrong with that?
Right. It sounds so great. And I want to save you from these evil things that are guns. And we should all be exactly the same. It just sounds so pretty.
Right. Like most dreams.
Right.
Like most dreams, it sounds pretty, but it really isn't. It's actually very devious. Okay, so that, to me, I find that very interesting. And I think I was telling you also, when I was working on Wall Street, one of my very best friends and coworkers was a Cuban immigrant he was born here rather, but his parents and his older siblings were born in Cuba, and their mom literally scooped them up and was one step ahead of Castro's police all the way to New York, basically. And he had the same type of stories. He had the same type of stories, where, like the idea of police capturing you to take you to, as you said, a gulag was very real. It's not imaginary. It's very real. And people forget in 1940, 41, we had the same thing here when we rounded up Japanese Americans and put them in internment camps. People don't realize that possibly the greatest socialist president in this country's history, FDR, had no qualms, zero qualms about taking American citizens based on their ethnicity and putting them in concentration camps. You could call them internment camps. The only thing different from him and Hitler was that FDR didn't murder anybody in those camps, but he rounded people up based on their skin color, put them in those camps, took away their property, took away their rights, no trials, no warrants. To your point, Yeah, it can happen here. It's not far-fetched. It can happen
COVID
here.
taught me some things too. I mean, not. I don't want to get into the discussion of whether the vaccine or not. I really think that we get lost in those weeds of like we're
Right.
not at the same side because of this. Putting that aside, just the fact that you were locked in your home so easily, that
Mm,
neighbors were turning on neighbors, that places like Australia, which we have always thought of as free as America, were rounding people up like in America, those internment camps. I mean, that was such a wild experiment.
mm.
And I still, to this day, come across people that are like, yeah, but still, that would just never happen here. It's like, for the first time in my life, when I was a child and I studied, like Nazi Germany, and you're like, how could that ever happen? How could neighbors turn on neighbors?
Right.
And then COVID happens, and it's like, you're not wearing that mask. I'm going to call police on you. Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
what a wake up call.
it was. And like you said, without debating the vaccine, the virus itself, because I have mixed feelings about that. But everything I can agree on with you is like, yeah, you shouldn't be forced to take a vaccine. You shouldn't be forced to stay in your home. Ratting people out like that, total surveillance state, total security state move. Um, so I think as libertarians, and I know we have that wide range of responses, like I know Penn Jillette said he was embarrassed to be a libertarian because he said this is where we should be arguing for choice instead of saying no to everything blanket. And I know that you have the really hardcore, like the Mises guys and the ANCAPs and the anarchists who are like, everything's a lie. COVID's a lie, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, the earth is flat, so you go those range of responses, right? So without getting into that, to your point, why not focus on the true libertarian position, which is like, you can't make me do anything don't want to do, and that's the position I've always held. You want to take the vaccine, God bless, go take the vaccine.
Yeah,
It's nobody's business. Your medical history is your own. Do whatever you want. The moment you start imposing yourself on others, pro or con, that's when all of us should have just held our hands as libertarians together, held our hands and said, stop. That part is
absolutely.
done with, right? Okay, so
And
uh
it just to that point,
yeah,
I think Spike Cohen was excellent on this. He was our 2020 vice presidential
presidential
candidate,
candidate. Yep.
and he was fantastic on this. He suffers from a condition. He suffers from MS, and so he was like, I can't take this vaccine. Like, but I still support you if you want to, but also we should not be forcing people. The government should not be forcing people to do this. So I think we do have strong libertarian voices within the party itself, and
Right.
just popular doing stuff, and we should really be amplifying those voices. I really think that there's a lot of normal libertarians, and yet we get pinned as being this like insane
Yeah.
with insane positions. And then you go to the other parties. I was just at CPAC recently, and there's a lot of crazy in all parties.
Right.
So I hate that it's just, oh, those libertarians are crazy. We're crazy, but we're also often right, and we're often right decades in advance. So we might be crazy, but
Yeah, it it's great that you say that because one of the things I always love to do in these interviews is kind of suss out for people how people arrive at their libertarianism because it's a very unnatural state. Even though it's a natural state for humanity, it's an unnatural state politically if you kind of understand what I'm trying to say. So I always like my journey. I'm a New Yorker. I started out, unlike most New Yorkers, as a conservative, and I called myself a Goldwater conservative, and then eventually I said, well, the people I thought who were for minimal government still want to control you when it comes to your bedroom and when it comes to your morality, so to speech, which was very big for me, like the back in the '80s. For those of us old enough, as you could tell from the gray hair, uh, the attempts to uh, silence rock and roll and to get rid of certain lyrics and the war on pornography and things like that, which to me were like so anti-American, so anti-First Amendment. How could conservatives support these things? But they did. And that made me start wondering. And that's what put me on the path to libertarianism. Obviously, for you, it's obvious what your path, what ignited you. It was the,
actually,
I was
my
going to say,
parents are Republicans. My parents are conservative, So I didn't even know that there was a thing such as being a libertarian
Right.
when I started voting. So I wasn't an immediate libertarian despite my history. You would
Right.
think so, but no.
Well, if you were to stereotype Cubans of that era as a voting bloc, they were overwhelmingly Republican,
They
especially
still
after
are.
the right, and they still are.
They
I know.
still are.
I know. Help me out here. Are you still in Miami, by the way,
I am
or
still in Miami.
so
Um,
that area? I heard that the Cuban population there as a voting bloc was starting to shift away from the Republic. Is that still the case, as far
Not
as
that
you
I'm
know?
aware of. They're still very much pro. I mean, all the Cubans that I talk to now are like super pro Trump, pro Republican. And actually, when I talk to a lot of them, I'm oftentimes disappointed
Hmm.
because they'll be like freedom in Cuba, and then they'll come here, and people know me for my stances on marijuana as well. And
Right.
they're like, well, you just want to use this evil drug and you need to, and it's like, well, hey, it's okay. You don't have to agree with me, but I also don't want to put people in a cage because they think differently than you do. And they have a hard time sometimes seeing that issue. So I think that everybody has a blind spot.
Yeah.
And usually it's your morality is your blind spot. And
Right.
that kind of it's a hard pass for a lot of people to understand that you don't have to agree. You
Right.
just don't want to tell other people how to live their lives. And that's usually where we lose a lot of people. And I think unfortunately that those bros that we're talking about, the like Mises, the very hardcore, we lose people in that. And so
Yeah.
those normal voices kind of I keep coming back to it because it's like if you find a normal libertarian voice, let's promote that.
And it's funny you said that because that's been one of my qualms. I mean, flat out, I'm not a political beast. I really am not. I've never had like your gumption to get up and run for commissioner. You couldn't get me to do that ever in my life. It's just not something I was interested in. But I'm
I
always
wasn't
interested.
either.
Yeah, I'm interested in the thought process, and to me, it's just as important that if one of the young kids that works for me or one of the interns here, if I talk to them for an hour and I can get them to watch a Milton Friedman YouTube video explaining healthcare, or if I can get them to listen to Spike, or if I could get them to listen to Larry Sharp, or somebody like that, and they start
Larry Sharp
questioning.
is a great one too.
Oh,
Yeah.
love Larry. We had him on our show last night, actually, on the live stream. But I find that is so much more powerful. So I agree with you on that. And it's just so. Let me ask you this: one of the things I always say is, to me, if I was a member of a perceived minority group, whether it's women, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's the 420 movement, whatever, I would think that you would immediately align yourself with libertarians. One would think that the two thought processes are so aligned. I've asked Chase Oliver this, where because he's a gay man, and I said, as you travel the country, why is it that your community isn't more libertarian? And he actually was very forthcoming. He said, I have to actually work with them. You would think it'd be an easy sell, but it's not.
It's not.
You're a successful female CEO. We always hear about the difficulty, the quote lack of representation in the C-suite. Why do you think that more females aren't attracted to the Libertarian Party? Is it that the typical image of a libertarian, which is either a hardcore, as you said, a hardcore Mises dude, or uh, the quote unquote intellectual white male, the guys with patches on their elbows, smoking a pipe, telling you about Hop and Locke and all these libertarians and Mises and Rothbard, right? Is it that it's that image? How do you, and I don't mean to say, hey, I'm a woman, I don't know if you care to identify yourself like that, but it really, maybe I could say it bothers me that I don't see more females in the party, or at least libertarian females. I don't see more gay libertarians. I don't see more libertarians of color. What do you think that's an issue with libertarianism? And what's the best way to combat it if you think it is?
I think there's several issues here. So first off, for women specifically, just because we're not as political as men. So first off, women is a whole other entity in and of itself. I want to kind of separate it from gay or color of skin or Hispanic or from whatever. So
Right.
I think that that right there is difficult. And then as a woman, you come into these male dominated spaces and you get this, this backlash, this kind of like fighting among, and it's like, come on, guys, I'm not here to compete with you. I don't care. So I'm going to quickly plug Lola,
Mm.
which is how we got connected
Right.
through Lola, which is Ladies of Liberty Alliance. And they're a libertarian organization specifically for women.
Okay.
And so I stepped away from the Libertarian Party, but I've gone headfirst into Lola because, we just recently did a party of the Lola girls here in Miami. And we did it here at my house, and we did it as like a birthday. It was my birthday as well as Ross Ulbricht's mom, Lynn Ulbricht's birthday. And so we kind of did like and Shannon, the girl who runs Lola Miami chapter, it was all of our birthdays. So we did a little get together, and we talked politics, but we talked about it in a way where it was just women getting together, doing what we normally do, sharing. And I think that that's needed. And so I really love organizations like Lola that are creating chapters all around the world where we can connect. We have these, amazing experiences together. We talk about politics and we become leaders within our own community of women.
Mm.
And that's really, really important because you just can't like one size fits all for everything. But then going to the other groups, I think that we need strong people in each category to go out and reach those groups. Chase Oliver is a perfect example, because nobody's going to speak to, I see it often in the Hispanic community. I mean, the Biden campaign recently launched in Miami, their Hispanics for Biden, and there was literally not a single Hispanic in that room. And
Right.
so it's like, we know what you Hispanics need, and we're going to tell you from the top. And that is a problem everywhere you go. So if you are, I don't know, like Chase, a gay man, you're going to go into the gay community and be like, hey guys, these people are coming here and telling you as Democrats, as Republicans, they know what's best for you, but do they? And where are they? And where's their gay representation? And who is their gay representation? We have somebody like Maj Touré, who's
Big gun guy.
yeah, I'm sorry?
Big gun guy. 2A guy. Yeah.
Big 2A guy. And he does Black Guns Matter or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes out into the community. I think he's in Philadelphia, and he trains people how to use weapons. He does this fantastic job, and he's very much a libertarian. Is he the perfect libertarian? Who knows? But we need to just stop like with this perfect idea of what a libertarian is and let people do it in their own communities. We have the Alaskan libertarian. I don't know. She's out in her community. I mean, just it doesn't matter what community it is. If you have this passion for libertarianism, do it in your community. I try to do it in the Cuban community as much as I can. And I try and especially do it for the women. These are my communities. These are where
Right.
I feel like I fit in. The Cuban community is a little different. We're still trying to fight for freedom in Cuba, and we're being blocked by the United States. And the United States is, for most people, your representation of what libertarianism is. It's capitalism, it's all these things,
Right.
but it's really not. So in the Cuban community, it's especially difficult because, oh, you want to be like the United States, but the United States is also blocking you for going back home and fighting for your country.
Right.
We have either Proclamation 86, 87 that stops us from even using a boat to head close to Cuba, to the Nikita Treaty. I mean, there's just too many things on the books that will land us on an FBI watch list, in jail. So it's a little difficult within the Cuban community because we do have this very strong US government beating us down at all times. And people really don't want to talk about freedom for the United States. They want to talk about freedom for Cuba. So I hold out hope that we can save Cuba and save America at the same time.
There was hope. I honestly was one of those people that said, maybe when Fidel goes, like when he finally dies, maybe there would be enough of a pent up groundswell, but it didn't really play out that way, which is a shame. And you're right. I don't think U.S. policy does any favors for Cuba becoming free. Like, they should learn from the Soviet Union. Just open up trade.
We have trade. There is something that people are always telling me about Cuba. It's like, well, it's the blockade, and that's why. No, we have trade. The United States is the number one partner for medicine and chicken to Cuba.
but I'm saying it's not free trade. So
It
it's
is
not
free trade in a lot
in
of ways.
certain categories. Yeah. I just meant like to the extent that like I still remember the Iron Curtain, and to this day I will credit, there is of course the fear of Reagan Star Wars that helped bring that down. But the underlying thing that a lot of people don't realize, it was rock and roll, Coca-Cola, and Levi's that helped bring down that curtain. The kids in Russia said, "This is what we want. We want to hear Billy Joel, that famous concert he did in Moscow, and we want to wear Levi's because they look cool." And we love Coke. We love
They love
Coca-Cola.
America, and
Yeah.
they wish to have. I mean, you could find American products in Cuba, and they wish to have more. The problem with Cuba is they don't have any money. They don't
Mm,
have any real money, so no American goods are really going over there unless it's through the Cuban regime.
right.
But recently, there's been popping up in Havana. They have Teslas in Havana. Okay, in a country that doesn't have stable electricity, and it's an American car. How did that make it there? Because the elites in Cuba do have the ability to purchase from America, but their currency is so devalued. And we could get into it if you wanted to,
Right.
but it's very technical and very boring. But they have different categories. Cubans are paid in CUPs, in the Cuban peso. Then, in order to purchase things that you would want, you have to go to a government store, which is MLC payment, which is a Visa credit card that the government gives you. It's like, I call it Chuck E. Cheese money. And then you
Right.
can also use the dollar or the euro. But Cubans are paid in Cuban peso, and they have to convert it on the black market to be able to buy these goods. So it's almost impossible for Cubans to obtain American goods because their currency. That is not something that the United States is doing, because when I talk to communists and socialists, they're like, well, if only the United States lifted the embargo. Listen, the embargo is an embargo on the regime. It is not on the people of Cuba. The people of Cuba have a real embargo by that same regime that won't allow them to better themselves. And what do
Right.
I mean? They cannot, it's an island. They are surrounded by fish, and yet they are starving. They are unable to go out and catch food in the waters
Right.
because their own government is like, no, you can't do that. To capture a lobster in Cuba will land you in jail for years. So, but I have pictures of Fidel Castro going out hunting for lobsters because the elites can do it. The people at the bottom cannot. So it's really an issue of the regime is why Cuba is in the situation it is. But American socialists on top, like, are the number one promoters of the Cuban regime. They're like, it's the United States. And then I have to deal with libertarians that are like, it's the United States. And it's like, no, it's not. But,
Right.
it's very hard to convince libertarians that they're wrong.
Well, yeah. The only thing you could convince a libertarian of is that the other guy is not a real libertarian, and
Yes.
I always fall into that. Since you
I'm
brought,
never a real libertarian.
so here's something that's interesting on your Twitter timeline, on your X timeline. I often see you talk about Che Guevara. I see you talk about Javier Milei. Now, both of them happen to be Argentinian-born political figures, right? Why do you think, and I understand being Cuban is not, being Latino is not monolithic. A lot of people just say Latino, and they assume every Latino is identical. And if you're a marketer, there's a big difference between Cuban Americans, Mexican Americans, Puerto Rican Americans, Dominican Americans, Costa
Even
Rica,
if you're
right?
not a marketer, if you're a Hispanic person and they take
Oh.
you out to eat and they're like, you don't like hot sauce? And it's like, I thought all Mexicans liked hot sauce. And it's like, I'm from another country.
Oh my goodness! I joke with people that in the '70s, as going to grade school in Manhattan, Upper Manhattan, every avenue. So in New York, avenues run parallel to each other, right? So every avenue in this upper part of Manhattan had a different Latino culture on it. So if you started out on Broadway, it was Puerto Rican. Then if you went to Amsterdam Avenue, it was Dominican. Then if you went like a little bit further down, it was Costa Rican. And
There's over 20 countries.
yeah, and in between is where you had the fights between the different Latino cultures of the avenues, right? Because if you went on the cross streets, it was always some sort of, like, when I say fights, like as kids, rumbles, this and that. So I understand that there's a difference. So I don't mean to paint with a broad brush here, but why do you think that to this day, someone like Che is sort of idolized and mythologized, and the complete ignorance of the fact that he was a mass murderer, regardless of whatever else he did, right? You see these dopey kids, in my opinion, wearing Che shirts as if, like, hey, the equivalent. Yeah, like if I was walking around with a Hitler T-shirt, in my mind, there's very little difference there, or a
Exactly.
Stalin T-shirt, right? And
You
then you
see
bring,
big stars like
yeah,
Jay-Z or Santana. I mean, they all wear the Che Guevara shirts. Like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah. So, okay, Mr. Liberal, you're just promoting the legacy of a mass murderer, and then you come across someone like Javier Milei, who I like. I have mixed feelings about him, but generally overall good, right? Afuera, afuera, right? All that stuff. So but why do you think there's less of an embrace of someone like a Javier Milei, who is out there trying to affect positive change? We already see the positive change, uh, but yet Che Guevara, no matter how much you try to show pictures to people, historical footage, whatever, there's still this like, no, he was a hero. He was a champion of the poor. Now, is that just dopey Americans, or do Latinos actually know the difference even to this day, or no? What would you say?
so I think it's a matter of education. I think
Mm,
that most people who believe that Che Guevara was some type of hero, it's a lack of education, or they've been educated by a communist socialist that's absolutely adores them and is like, this is it. This is the greatest thing ever. Che Guevara was not only a mass murderer, he absolutely hated people of color and people who were gay.
mm,
And I find it especially horrible, like in the case of Jay-Z, when a black man wears his face on a shirt, unironically. And when, I've seen pride flags with his face or shirts that have his face with the pride flag. And it's very difficult to tell people that they are so completely false, especially when it's written in his own words in books that you can pick up today that have been translated to almost every language. So
right.
it is absolutely an educational issue. But also in Latin America, some people just really like Che Guevara still because socialism is just there's a very famous Hispanic woman who is a libertarian, Gloria Alvarez. I don't know if you're familiar with her and if your audience is familiar with her, but Gloria Alvarez is not only a friend, she is somebody that I've looked up to for many, many, many years. And she once said that socialism is sold the way a Disney movie is sold. You see a Disney or a rom-com, and it's like, and they lived happily ever after and everything's great. And that is what socialism is. And how can you compare your life, your romantic life, to a rom-com? And you can't.
Right.
Your partner's maybe not going to come up to your window with the song, the boombox in the face. And you're like, well, this guy just isn't like that character, that fictional character, so he sucks. The same thing with everyday life. They paint you this picture of this beautiful, like, this is what it's going to be like. And the reality is so incredibly different.
Right.
And then you hear but that wasn't real socialism. We tried it. So how many times do you have to bake a cake and it come out bad for you to realize that the recipe is just god awful? And just to finalize that point, I'm Cuban, and just because I'm Cuban doesn't mean I like all Cubans. Fidel Castro was a Cuban. I very much detest him, but the thing that he did have was that he was incredibly intelligent, Machiavellian intelligent. I mean, this man was just top of his game in intelligence. So if Fidel Castro, one of probably the most intelligent human beings, evil, but intelligent human beings on the planet, couldn't figure out communism,
Right.
why do you think your third rate, Bernie Sanders is going to figure it out? Like, come on, let's be realistic here. So if this system hasn't worked over and over and over, and all it leads to is destruction, death, starvation, it's about time we really talk about, even if it's a wonderful concept, it's a wonderful idea, it's a Disney movie, get over it. It's not going to work out. It's just like your marriage is never going to be a Disney princess movie. It just isn't. It's the reality versus the fictional.
It's true, and it's funny because sometimes I just look for small examples of how to approach people, and one of them is my niece, who, when she was still in school, she was in college, and I've been sort of prepping her with libertarian infiltration over the years and everything,
As a good uncle should.
as a good uncle should. But it was interesting to me that at one point she couldn't have been more than 12. She said to me something along the lines of, Uncle John, why is it that my dad has to pay so much in taxes when people who don't work don't have to pay anything? I said, well, that's our tax system. I was playing dumb with her, and she said, but it just isn't fair. Now, is it? I said, of course it's not fair. Does your father get, this handout, that handout? No, but he's paying for it. Yes, he is. Okay. Well, what if he wanted to help them? Well, then he could do that. Why should it be taken from, and then all of a sudden, like, you could see that 12-year-olds get the concept. 12-year-olds, before these college professors get their hands on them, they get this. They get it instinctively. They understand the quote fairness of it all, and to me that gives me hope that if you could keep them away from these leftists, these socialists, these communists,
have them get a job before they go to college. I think
yes,
that is the number one thing, and I'm a mother of 4, and every time my kid goes off to the, I have a 23-year-old now, 20-year-old that are in the workforce,
right.
And their first job is always like, ooh, I'm going to make X number of dollars. And I don't tell them anything. It's like, oh, you're going to make whatever, $20 an hour, whatever the number is. And I let them think, and they calculate, they're like $20 an hour times, so many. And they come home with their first check, and it's like, where did my money go? That is the best teaching lesson.
I always joke that, Milton Friedman said the only regret he had in life was that he helped figure out how to implement the withholding tax. And he said that was my biggest regret in life, when he worked for the government, And I said, well, I agree that was pretty bad for someone like Milton Friedman. But at the same time, I doubt any single event does more to convert like teetering socialists into capitalists more than that first FICA sum that you see on your check. It's like, hey, you're losing this much, whether you like it or not. And then all of a sudden, like you said, that's when the bells come on, the light comes on rather. So yeah, that's very interesting. Okay.
They definitely need to get out into the workforce before those socialist teachers get a hold of them.
Agreed.
That should be like, we should do gap years, like in, everywhere else in the world, so kids can figure out what their passion is, what they want to do. Right. So that they also understand that if they get a loan for $100,000 and they can't get a job that pays enough to pay that back, that's a bad loan. I mean, it's just so many reasons not to send your kids directly to college.
Well, actually, I heard Larry Sharp say this, and I agree with him. It's bad to send them to college without a plan. Mm-hmm. So if you go to college and you have a kid that's particularly motivated to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a biologist, a chemist, right. Send them to college, because you don't have to worry about them, in my opinion. You don't have to worry about people like that. They're motivated, they're ambitious, right? For the most part.
They're also not into politics, so they're really
probably not. They're all nerds to begin with, and I speak as someone who got 2 science degrees, right? But here's the thing. Like, when you send them to college aimlessly, like, okay, the first 2 years are going to be feeling out. I don't know what my major is going to be. I have no clue what my major. That's when you get in trouble, because then you're taking these nonsense classes to just get A's or whatever, gender studies, neo-Marxism, whatever, and that's when you get into trouble. So I do agree with you. I do think that hitting the workforce, even if you do end up going to college, like, I don't know about you, I would assume, like, I worked my way through college. So it's like, I got done at 5. I went off to do 4 hours part-time somewhere so I could earn a little bit. My parents weren't wealthy. So that helped me keep things in perspective, right? So, and I think that helps as well. Okay.
Yeah, in my case, I started a business with my mother. So I would work the business during the day and then take classes at night.
There you go.
Paid my way through college on my $9 the hour, little salary that I was making. And so, college is really expensive now. And I don't think that that's really an option for a lot of kids, which is, another thing that the government has done poorly. And it's not getting any better. I don't know, other than just completely bring down the government. I don't know how we solve this problem for the young kids, but there's really a problem. And I think that we're not addressing that. And that's why we're losing market share in the ideas of like libertarian ideas. right? Because if you're a
Yeah.
young kid, you can't get an apartment. I mean, I live in Miami where the average rent now is over $2,000 a month. I mean, you just can't make it unless you have parents that are helping you
Yeah.
in this day and age. So I think there's a lot, and we could do with a dose of humility and a dose of like trying to understand where people are coming from. These kids, they don't have the financial education. They're being told to go take out these monster loans. They think that the housing problem is because boomers aren't leaving their homes because that's what they're being told, rather than looking at in Miami, there's a backlog of construction permits that just haven't been issued. I was talking to somebody that it took them 3 years to get a building permit. So we have a lot of problems that the government is causing, and then these kids don't see that. So
Mm.
going back to that issue of how do we get libertarians to people to realize that they're a libertarian or whatever, I think we really need to start focusing where people are and bringing them into the fold, because we're not doing a good job of that.
And I'm glad you said that, because it gives me the segue that I needed to get to my next topic, which was RFK. This seemed to be one of those defining moments if you're a libertarian, political or philosophical, right? But mainly for the politicians. Like, you didn't seem to object to the possibility of RFK running at the top of the LP ticket.
And that got me some backlash.
Yeah, and I was one of them, to be honest with you, right?
I have a point to it, though. So
yeah, but I want you to talk about it. But I just want to set you up, like, in full transparency, I disagree with that position, simply because I think you don't do any favors to anyone when someone's not a libertarian. I think we should have learned. Yeah, I think we should have learned our lesson from William Weld.
Absolutely. This is a strategy issue,
right?
Not
Go
a
ahead.
philosophical issue. So I absolutely want a libertarian to run. I am a huge fan of Justin Amash. I've already mentioned Spike Cohen. I love Chase. I love Lars. There's a whole bunch of really good guys that are running. And Jacob Hornberger, last time around, was endorsed by the Mises Caucus. I think he's fantastic.
All of them are.
All of them. I mean, honestly, what party has so many people that you would be not only just excited for them to be the top of the ticket, but you would go out and volunteer and you'd be like, wow, we have an overabundance of quality candidates. I am so proud of all of these people.
Right.
And honestly, all of them. I would vote for all of them in a heartbeat. Problem. Running for president, like running for Miami-Dade County Commission, is not only about your name recognition. It's not only about the money you can get. It's also about the machine. And the Libertarian Party, we've built a little machine, but it's definitely not at the par of Republicans and Democrats. We don't have ballot access everywhere. We have to work really hard for it. We don't get into the debates. There are a lot of issues. And I've been a libertarian for a long time, as you have, and we've seen the party change, but we've also seen the political landscape change. In 2016, I volunteered for Gary Johnson's campaign. This was the first time as a mother of four, I was getting a divorce, and I all of a sudden had free time when my kids were with their father. From being mom 365 days a year, I had 50% of my time off, and I was like, what am I going to do with this time? I'm going to dedicate it to politics. And so I volunteered for Gary Johnson, and I went to New Mexico. I flew to New Mexico for the election day, and I worked the poll in his district where he lives. And I encountered so many people that were like, I love Gary Johnson. He's the greatest. He was the greatest governor. He's such a great guy. My kids went to school with him, whatever the case was. Oh, great. So you're voting for him? Oh, no. I can't let fill in the blank win. It was either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. It was, I am voting for X person because I can't let Y person win.
Right.
And other people that didn't know him personally were like, a what? He's a what? A libertarian? What is that?
Is that a liberal? Is that a liberal?
They had no idea where we were. Today, everybody knows what a libertarian is. They might not agree with us, but they know. We are making progress. So RFK, where does he play into this? Unfortunately, none of our candidates have enough money, name recognition, or machinery to get us anywhere near Gary Johnson's 4.5%. It's just the reality. I worked on Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen's campaign. I did their Hispanic outreach. With $0, we got 5% more votes than Gary Johnson, even though Gary Johnson spoke Spanish and neither of our candidates did at that time. So we definitely have a place to gain traction. We are not there yet. We don't have the machinery. We don't have the money. We don't have the name recognition. How do we get there? How do we break the duopoly? That's where RFK comes in. RFK has the name recognition. He's got the machinery. He's got the money. He can break the duopoly, get us over that 5%, maybe even 10, 15%. He's not going to make it to the White House. We act like we somehow are going to elect the next president. And it's like, no, we're not. Guys, I love liberty and I want that more than anything. But there's no world where a Biden or a Trump isn't the winner. We're not there yet. We're not going to be there. So if RFK takes the top of the ticket, he's going to knock people off on the Biden side, which for me is a fantastic plus. Let's go. I cannot deal with another, 4 years of Biden. I don't necessarily like Trump, but if we got to choose between, one or the other, I'll take Trump, especially now that he's being persecuted, because he's sounding a lot like the people back in Cuba, Nicaragua. Like he's finally understanding where we're coming from. So let's do the most damage to the duopoly we can. And that's my position. If RFK takes the top of the ticket and we convince one of these wonderful gentlemen to be his running mate, because unlike the R's and the D's and everybody's like, oh, well, he already chose who's going to run with him. No. If he is the libertarian ticket, he doesn't get to choose. We choose. That's the wonderful thing about the libertarians. We choose president and vice president independently. So we take one of these gentlemen to take the second position, and we actually have a platform to talk about. And we can talk about, listen, RFK, this is the deal, man. You take the Libertarian Party and you want to talk all that trash about the 2A not being important or that you signed something, that's on you. We're going to talk shit about you. We are. We're going to say, no, that is not our position. He's just the guy running, but that's not it. This is our position. We believe X, Y, Z, and you will have a platform way bigger than what our guys can get. So for me, it's about smashing that duopoly. I want to get us into the debates. I want to get us into the national stage so that people are like, why aren't the libertarians included? Why don't they have a platform? And why is it that in order for them to get ballot access, they have to do this whole rigmarole, whereas, our candidates only need 25 signatures and $25. Like, where is that? That is right there what they use to control the narrative. Right. They don't do it by just signaling out, no, we're not going to have that. No, they do it with, hey, if you can make 15% in the polls, and then we're not polled. Right. So, right. We have to understand where we're standing before we can, like, we aren't even like walking the same race, much less running, So yeah. That's my point.
Yeah. I mean, I understand your point intellectually. And I also agree with you. One of the biggest problems as individuals that people have is they're willing to vote against someone rather than for someone. And I swore that off after the last time I voted against someone was Bill Clinton, when he ran against Bush, because I wasn't too fond of Papa Bush,
and
right?
Ross Perot.
Yeah.
Ross Perot was in there.
wasn't really into Ross at that point either, but my point was that I really didn't say to myself, I'm voting for Bush as much as I was. And after that, I vowed to myself, especially as you get older, you're still a young lady, Martha, but as you get older, you start to see history repeat itself every 15, 20 years. You get to see this generational repetition.
Not that young. I did say I have a 23-year-old son. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Keep it to yourself, Martha. But, you see this repeating itself over and over. I say, even to the people who support Trump, I say, okay, he's a Republican because he chose to call himself a Republican. 10 years ago, he walked around right near my neighborhood saying, I'm just a Democrat from Queens. Prior to that, or in between that, he called himself an independent. His views haven't changed, but it's very telling that the Republican Party is willing to accept him now, where 20 years ago they wouldn't have. Certainly in Reagan's time, they wouldn't have. The same thing for the Democrats. They're getting more and more pushed to the left, right, so that someone like an AOC can now call herself a Democrat, whereas in Moynihan's day, or Sam Nunn's day, she would have been a loon. She would have never been elected, right? She would have been a communist. And even the Democrats would have said, we don't want any of this, right?
Bill Clinton's positions were almost center now. Like they're almost like Republican positions.
Who was the last president to have a balanced federal budget?
Clinton. It was
Clinton.
What Ross Perot's doing.
It was Ross Perot. It was also Gingrich
Yes, but the
playing.
Ross Perot kind of push, people saw that there was another opportunity. He
Right.
came very close.
Yes.
So that was kind of like a, maybe we need to change our
It,
ways
it
too.
was that, like you said, it was an inflection point in history, and some people learned from it, some never did. And I look at it now and I said, if I don't see someone I want to vote for, I will either stay home or I'll write my own name, which I've been doing lately because it also gums up the poll workers. You know, like you give them a handwritten ballot, they don't know what to do with it. And like last time around when I voted for Larry Sharp, his name, you know, New York managed to get him kicked off the ballot again. So I had to write his name in, which I did. The poll workers didn't know what to do with that. I was there for an hour while they were looking at it like it was a moon rock. You know, they were like, what's this? How do we, you know, what do we do? You know, and at one point, one of the old ladies that was there comes up to me. She goes, son, why don't you just vote for someone that's on the paper? You know, it's a lot easier that way. And I said, nope. And I had my phone out and I said, this better get sealed. It better, you know, and sure enough, they eventually got it right. But it caused them an hour delay. And I said to myself, can you imagine now that if every libertarian in Long Island went to their polling place and said, I want to write in Larry Sharp, I'm going to take the hour out of my day to gum up their works. What do you think is going to happen? Eventually, they're going to be, okay, let's just put these stupid libertarians on because people are going to kill us every day. People are going to start revolting if their typical 1 hour at the poll now takes 8 hours.
That would
right?
work if government was a business.
Yes.
Government is not a business, and government is never in the business of improving quality or customer service or even the workflow of their employees. So that could potentially work, but
it's sort of like the voting equivalent of nullification, I guess. You know, it's like, to me, it's like make them do some work, and eventually, I think it may have a shot. It's better than doing nothing, you know, Martha.
Shot, but that's where the CEO brain comes in, and I'm like, listen, let's strategize. If we had even a shot of getting towards the presidency, I'd be like, you know what? No, let's run a real campaign. Let's go for it. Let's put everything behind it. But we worked darn hard for Joe and Spike's campaign over COVID, when you'd think,
yes,
what better opportunity than while we're all being locked in our homes. And people aren't really that receptive to change. So again, I go back to listen, I get it. And I'm not selling this as a libertarian strategy. And there's no world where RFK is even remotely libertarian. I wouldn't vote for him if he was an independent. I would never even come close. As a libertarian, I would do it only because we just need to break that 5%, get ballot access, get in front of people. I want people to be like, wait, RFK is a libertarian? And understand. And then here, you know, imagine him with a Spike Cohen or a Larry Sharp, and they're like, he's not. But let me tell you the libertarian stance, and win them over. That's my point.
Well, it's certainly a chaos agent. Absolutely. There's no doubt that it would be a chaos agent, but it's a little bit of a moot point now. But
yeah, I mean, well, no, because he.
I thought. I thought he said he's not.
Both. He's done both.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know where it's going to be. I do believe he's talked very closely with the libertarians, and you know, I think he keeps hearing that we're like, absolutely not. So I think he has to take that under advisement and not seek our nomination once it's been, like, he needed to do a better job of seeding his position as to why the Libertarian Party was
the right move for him.
Yeah, he might have already blown it, but honestly, I don't have much hope for our candidates. And again, I know them all personally. Most of them are really great friends. I absolutely adore them. I'm glad to hear that you've spoken to Chase. I think he's absolutely wonderful. If you have not talked to Lars, highly recommend Lars Mapside.
To your point, I've talked to all of them. Mike Termott's another one I like a lot. You know, it's like I'm having the unique problem and very happy problem of I can't choose among them. I think there's so many good candidates. I wish I could vote for them all. Right. Okay.
I'll
Martha,
vote for whoever's at the top.
Fair enough.
That way I don't have to choose. You know, right now I keep getting all of their campaigns like, hey, support me. And I'm like, how do you ask a mother to choose between her children?
Yes,
That's how I feel.
It's Sophie's choice at this point with them. Okay, Martha, thank you very much. I want to get to the part of this show now that I always find fun. I call it silly questions. There's absolutely no right or wrong answers. I just want people to get a little bit of a feel for you, understand you, get to know you a little bit better. So, first silly question. If you had the ability to change, implement, or eliminate one law, just one law, in order to help most help small businesses in the U.S., what would that law be?
Oh God, that's a great question, and I've never thought of it. Just one law. I have too many, and I know I'm going to regret whatever I say now because I'm going to be like, "Why didn't I think of that?" Boy, probably licensing laws.
That's a good one.
Licensing laws, and I think a lot of people don't understand that that license that the government gives you doesn't do anything for it. I mean, Yelp has done more for communities finding who's good and who's not than the government ever has. So
right.
And licensing laws just keep people out of the business. So
and they're also shakedowns. That's all they are, is government shakedowns. When has a license ever made you feel any more comfortable? How many doctors' licenses have you demanded in their office? Honestly,
right. And beyond that, I got a license to sell hemp in the state of Florida, and then the government's like, "Psych! Now it's illegal." So, it gives you this false sense of security that you're doing something that the government is okay with, and then they can yank it at any point. So, yeah,
it's crazy, but that's a good answer, though. I think it's small enough that it could be changed, especially in most areas. So maybe we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one. All right, second one. The one figure, dead or alive, that you'd like to have dinner with.
Ooh. I mean, I guess everybody's going to go with like God or some religious figure or something. So I'm going to go with Joe Rogan.
Interesting. Joe Rogan. Why Joe Rogan? I mean, not that I'm complaining. I think that's a good choice, but why would you choose Joe Rogan?
First of all, I want to choose something that somebody else is in. I mean, everybody
make it interesting.
Everybody wants to go with God. And yeah, if that was an option, obviously that, whatever. But somebody who's alive is probably going to be easier. And I don't know, it's my mission to get on Joe Rogan at some point. And I just think that, he's got a crazy story and he knows everyone and he's totally into ancient humans, which I am too. And I think it would be a crazy conversation. We could talk about all sorts of drugs he's tried. I've never tried DMT, but I'd love to. And he's like big on it. So it would be a great conversation. Plus, I'm sure it'd be hilarious.
And a lot of us owe this podcast format to him. It's pretty
format,
the long format, especially because I started in podcasting in 96, believe it or not. I was literally one of the first podcasters, so much so that I started it, quit, and came back to it before anybody ever noticed I was around. So, but the one thing I will say is the long format, him and Mark Maron created these long format shows that people have grown into. So he does deserve a lot of credit like that. Okay, great. You're watching TV, or your streamer, you're flipping channels or streams. What's the one movie, if you flash by it, you're like, I'm not moving off of this. I got to watch this till the end. And it's like, what's the one movie that when that happens, you're planting yourself, you're grabbing a drink and some sort of beverage or refreshment, and you're saying, I'm watching this till the end.
Or a joint. Contact.
With interesting.
Jodie Foster. Yeah.
I've never heard that as an answer, so you're very unique in that sense.
I've always been fascinated with outer space and what's out there and this idea. I think that's why I do like the ancient human type of, conspiracies or whatever. Just this notion of something that is bigger than us out in the world.
Excellent.
Have you seen it? Have you seen Contact?
I have seen it, but I will not say. Look, I'm basically an idiot. So the things that I stop and watch to the end, which drives my wife crazy, will be something like Animal House, or or something like that. Just like and what makes it worse is I've got the whole thing memorized, which drives my wife up a wall. It's like, okay, if I have to watch this, can you at least shut up so I can listen to the movie? So yeah, but no, that's a good. I
love the idea of it. It's just such a great movie. Jodie Foster's such a great actress.
Yes, she is excellent. Okay, good choice. What's the one thing that someone will say to you, thinking that it's a benign comment, but secretly it's driving you up a wall?
Oh my God. Okay, it happens all the time too. It's you look great for 4 kids. I appreciate that. I
Right.
do. But also, thanks.
Yeah, it's that left-handed compliment, right? It's like,
Yeah. You
yeah,
have kids or four kids?
for four kids.
For
Yeah,
four kids. If I would have
yeah.
only had two, then you look like shit.
Or if you didn't have any at all, who knows? But right, four,
Oh
you
my
look
God,
great.
bottom of the barrel. But you do have four kids, so that just puts you up a few notches.
I could see where that would drive you up a wall. Absolutely. Okay, the last one. Who would you say is the libertarian, again, philosopher, politician, just someone you know who had the greatest influence on you?
Oh man, this is gonna drive people crazy because I know Ron Paul is who everybody's like Ron Paul. I mean, I missed the Ron Paul revolution only because I was focused on LP. I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
like I knew of him and I thought he was great, but he just I don't know. He wasn't my entrance into
Right.
libertarianism. The one who sparked the I need to get out there and move and do something. I was already a libertarian, but he just spoke to me was Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson. Interesting.
And
Yeah.
I've gotten to meet him since, and I think he's a
Oh,
lovely individual. So, it's also I don't know, it's so great to be able to be in this small community where you actually have the opportunity to meet your heroes.
Martha, I may have to nag you for Gary's contact info. I have not been able to get him for an interview. And he's one of my favorites too that I would love to interview. I just have not been able to get a
He
hold of
got
him.
me off
So,
my behind and like,
yeah,
thinking I really need to go out there and help. And I
right,
think that counts for something. I mean, we all think about like what turned you libertarian or who like turned you onto this, but once you're already turned onto it, who motivates you?
right.
Who gets you out of bed and be like, I'm excited for this campaign or I'm
Yeah.
excited to go help and change the world in this way. And I think he
It's
doesn't get enough
literal.
credit.
Yeah. And it's literally two parts, right? It's getting you to understand about libertarianism and sort of formulating these ideas formally that you may have had. And then to your point, getting up and doing something about it. Because like for me, and to show you how old I am, it was Milton Friedman on the Phil Donahue show.
I mean, Milton Friedman is amazing. Like if I would have seen him live, I would have been like Milton Friedman because
Yes.
his thoughts, his ideas are fantastic.
Well, to someone like me who's a lazy, and I admit it, I don't like getting up too often, right? The thing I liked about Milton Friedman is he was a true teacher. He
Mm-hmm.
would like when he spoke to you, and when you see those wonderful, I still think the greatest president we can have is a never-ending YouTube loop of Milton Friedman clips. Like I think just put that in the White House, and we'd be in great shape. You want healthcare? Go look up the Milton Friedman YouTube on healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
But when he would go into hostile environments back in the 70s with all these hippies and intellectuals, where he would just listen, he'd never get upset. He would just say, let me explain to you why I think you're wrong. Did you ever consider this? Did you ever consider that? And when he took apart Phil Donahue, for people that don't know, Phil Donahue was one of the great socialist hopes in the 70s. He married Marlo Thomas, another actress, and he had his own talk show for years, very popular. He would go on that show more so than say even Ayn Rand, who had gone on Phil Donahue, and he just tore down Phil's worldview in such a way that you didn't even get the impression that he was scolding him. Almost, and we had rampant inflation, we had rampant unemployment. It was the collapse of Keynesianism at the end of the 70s, and he just took it all apart very expertly, and he said, "Don't be afraid of your freedom." That motivated me. Don't be afraid of your freedom. There's nobody sent from heaven here to show us how to live. And to me, that was and I wish I had met him personally, but Gary Johnson politically, I could very much understand how he would motivate you because like you said, he's normal. Who's more Joe average than
And
Gary?
he's also
Nobody.
not normal. He's climbed the 7 highest peaks in the world and one with a
Oh,
broken foot. This man is not normal. He looks excellent. He's in
yeah.
great shape. He was a 2-time governor of New Mexico. For all his faults, he did a fantastic job, left a surplus.
Governor No, right? They called him Governor No for all the spending bills he would
One of the things he did
veto.
that I thought was just brilliant was he said he accepted a donation from somebody and they called him up and said, "Hey, I need you to do this for me." He's like, "Where would you like the check refunded to?" And so those things spoke to me because he had moral character. He had, he was a businessman. He started a handyman business with his hands and then grew it into this great company. And then he
Construction
was like,
business, yeah.
right. And then he's like, I'm going to go out and help my community. I mean, what an inspirational man.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's to see him criticized over, you know, his stance on marijuana, which he was right about, to see him criticize. And he used to take it in stride and be like, I'm going to be the highest in office. And I was like, I see what you did there. And I'm a fan. Yeah, I think he was just, people don't give him enough credit for bringing in, the Libertarian Party grew under him without him even being part of the party, really, just as presidential candidate twice.
Right.
And,
No, that's a great choice. Very good choice. Martha Bueno, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you. You were a pleasure. Very, very good conversation. Please tell us a little bit where people can find out more about you, how they can find out about our good products. Please give us your contact info, whatever you want.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, is my favorite place. I'm on all the other social medias except for Facebook, where I got kicked off. I don't even know why. I don't really care. So on social media at Bueno for Miami. And yeah, that was my campaign thing, but it stuck. And so here it is. And then for Our Good, we currently sell a Delta 8 product that is going to be illegal in Florida here soon. So I don't know what the future of Our Good is going to be. But for now, people can still find us at ourgood.com. And our edibles are very different from everything else people are used to. We have absolutely no sugar and nothing in it that I wouldn't feed myself. And they're also very fast acting. They work within 15 minutes of taking it. So it has this incredible technology that I won't bore people with, but it works very, very fast. So it's the fastest edible that you can find at the moment. And we'll, I'm sure, be moving on to other things, but we're not there yet. So
what's the website they can go to for Our Good?
Ourgood.com, and that's OURGOOD. It's a play on my last name. Bueno is good in Spanish.
There you go. Martha Bueno, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'm happy we could hook up on this show and get this done. Really appreciate everyone. Make sure you follow Martha on Twitter. She's a great follow, especially if you're a libertarian. All right, you've been watching The Big Questions with Big John. Join us again next time where we'll have another super interesting person. Maybe not as interesting and super interesting as Martha, but we'll try.